start recording then. So. His roommate's learning other Torah. It's going to conflict.
Let's see.
So we're gonna go through the first half of Siman 321. I think Isaac is maybe doing the second half. No, just sorry,
He told me
we
this.
just went through this. Jacob is doing the second
I
half.
hope it's not.
So I'll say from the outset, I don't have any like grand chidushim for those of you who went through the material. It's like, you know, sort of one thing after another. But what we'll look for as we travel through Seifim 1 through 10 is just like any sort of common themes and any places where we can draw out some deeper questions. Rav Joel, I apologize for drawing so heavily on the Mishnah Brura. I hope there's plenty to go around for Thursday. So we'll start, and we'll be flipping back and forth between the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch. We'll go seif by seif. And we'll start with the first seif in the tour. But there's not so much to do on the first seif. Josie, do you want to read?
Sure. Chavile Pia.
Where are we?
I'm sorry, this is Siman Shin Kaf Aleph
Okay,
in
thank
the
you.
tour, right?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, just want to make sure I'm in the right place here. So just gonna put it out there. This first word is the second word is a little bit questionable.
I think Ezov.
I haven't no. Pia.
Oh.
But we'll get to that later. Chavile Ezov. V'koranit haknisan la'etzim ein mistapkin mehen. I'm sorry. Hichnisan la'etzim ein mistapkin mehen. Hichnisan ma'achal behema mistapek mehen. V'kotem v'ochel biyad aval b'lo b'chli umolel b'roshei esvotav. So these bundles of these sort of bundles of branches, pia or perhaps pua or sia, depending on your girsa. Chavile ezov, bundles of hyssop, and koranid, which are another type of sort of feed grain type of thing. Hichnisan la'etzim ein mestapkin mehen. If you brought them into your house Erev Shabbat, you can't separate them if you brought them in for the purpose of using them for fire, for their wood. But if you brought them in for the purpose of feeding your animals, you can separate them. And sort of squeeze them out. And you can even eat them, pulling them apart by hand. But you can't do it with some kind of utensil. And you can squeeze them. You can sort of, I think it's like squeeze the berries with your fingertips.
Just one correction there, Josie. Mistapek mehen, I believe, is use them or be sustained by them.
Okay.
So just summarize what the halacha is, and there's no difference here between the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch, so we'll just stick with the Torah for now.
Right. So basically, I've brought in to my house these bundles of flammable edible material, and if my original intent to bring them in was that I would use them for their flammability, then I can't actually benefit. They're effectively muktzah. Like I have no purpose for them. But if I brought them in with the intent that I was going to feed my animals with them, I can use them, and I can use them in several different ways. But I can't use them through some kind of utensil. But I can with my hands manipulate them and use them and squeeze them for all of their juicy goodness.
Right. When we say use, what are we talking about here?
For food in this case.
Eating them. And why, Josie or anyone else, why is it that we have to be kotem v'ochel b'yad v'lo b'klei? Maybe obvious, but just Ruben.
Because doing it biyad is kind of like using a shinui, I would say. So you don't want to do it kederech hachol, or the way you would do it during the week.
Great. I think we'll skip the Shulchan Aruch. It's the same. So we'll move on to Sif Bet. Before we move on, Reb Joel?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, Steve. Is there do you think there's an equivalent today, something that we have in our house that could either be muksa or could be food? I don't have an answer.
Yes.
I'm asking.
The one thing that comes to mind immediately is if you had not prepared for winter properly, and so the only salt you bought salt at the supermarket with the intention of salting your driveway, but it was actually table salt, and you just had an incredible amount of table salt to salt your driveway, that you could, if you brought it in with the intention of using it for table salt, you could not use it. For driveway salt, you couldn't use it as table salt on Shabbos. Does anyone else have any
Well,
other
on that
examples?
basis, good to remember that kosher salt used to be koshering salt. And it's only when Jews lived with the hipsters or the hipsters lived with the Jews that kosher salt became a delicacy. But old-time Jewish women, look, it was horror that people were putting koshering salt in their thing. So therefore, that would go to your muksa question.
Great, and that Rav Joel's question, I think, will point us to a larger theme here of things that are somewhere on the boundary between food and muktzah, or potentially mistaken for other things, but really at the margins of the meal. Obviously, hyssop branches and leaves are not going to be your primary, I hope, the primary thing you're eating. But most of the things we'll be looking at are the things at the edges of the meal, both literally, and in this sense also metaphorically, of on the boundary between either muktzah or malacha and food. With that in mind, let's turn to, oh, sorry, Ruben, go ahead.
Sorry, I just had a quick question. So we're saying the mukta is the underlying issue here. Is there potentially also an issue of borer? Because I saw that the Beis Yosef pointed to Siman Shin Yutet, which is about borer for this as well. I'm just wondering, if there's more than one potential issue underlying this, maybe if you have something that could be used for 8-seam, but it contains an edible part, and you're separating the edible part from the non-edible part, maybe there's also a borer issue. I'm not sure, but I'm wondering what you think about that. That's possible.
I didn't see anything come up for borer. Did anyone else?
I think the amyloline part can be borer, right? That's the whole point, and not
Right.
using flea to take.
Oh, okay. Specifically the moline, right? Okay, I see.
Though actually I have in the Mishnah Berurah, Beroshe etzba'otav v'lo b'chol hayad kederech she'oseh b'chol. That it's not from that list, it's not clear to me that he thinks it's a borer issue so much as a whole issue.
Okay.
I mean, I think though part of the thing with borer, right, is that you don't do it the way you normally do it during the week.
Right.
Right. And so it could still, there's a debate about this too. Is it about that or the kotem about whether or not that applies only to Yom Tov and not to Shabbos? Right. There's a whole question because I think that shows up in I may be going way off base here, but there's a debate about whether or not that that source is about Shabbat or Yom Tov.
I think that is a later Seif,
Okay.
but if I recall correctly.
I'll also comment that I think the Prisha brings that like this thief could also be talking about Tochen.
Yep. Any other last thoughts on this save? Okay, one down, 9 to go. So let's turn to Safe bet. Max, do you want to read?
Sure. In the tour? I
Mhm.
think it's the same basically. Okay. Okay. Ein osin mei melach harbe biyachad. Lates lesoch hakvashim, שכיוון שעושהו כדי להתקיים דמו לעיבוד, שהמלך מקיימם. Okay, so you can't make a lot of brine really, at the same time to put in with vegetables that you want to pickle, because that preserves them, and so it resembles ibud. Aval yechol la'asos mimenu me'at lasis lesoch hatavshil ve'im nosein lesocho shnei shlishei melach asur la'asos mimenu afil me'at. Okay, but you can make a small amount in order to, flavor a dish or something like that. But if the ratio is 2/3 salt, then you can't make even a little bit.
Great.
Even a small.
And let's just go through the base Yosef here. Max, do you want to continue?
Sure. All right. Mishnah beperek Shmona Shratzim ein osin hilmi b'Shabbos aval osehu mei melach v'tovel bahem pito v'nosein lesoch hatavshil. Okay, so the Mishnah there in Shmona Shratzim, the hilmi I think is like a more specific word for brine. So you can't make a brine, but you can make enough salt water to use as a dip for bread, or as a dressing. Okay, Amar Rabbi Yossi v'halo hi hilmi bein merubeh bein me'at ve'eluhen me'melach. Right, so
Sorry, I think the comma comes after ben muat.
okay, isn't it true that the salt water or the brine doesn't matter how much you're making? Got it. Okay, and that's the memelach that we're talking about.
Meaning that what's the machloket bin Rabbanan v'Rabbi Yossi?
It seems like mu'at or merubeh is the question. It seems like Tanakama thinks that you can make a small amount in order to dip your bread.
Great. Then
Okay.
Rabbi Yossi continues.
Right. Mutarin.
Or ve'elohen me melach hamutarin.
I'm messed up. Okay. Ve'elohen me melach hamutarin. Got it. Okay. Nosenas hashemen but bitchila lesoch hamayim o lesoch hamelach. So you can first put oil, and then add the water.
Great. Well, maybe I don't think we need to read the rest of this particular comment, but Max or anyone else, who does the halacha follow here?
Tanakama.
Great.
So I know our argument before was that this is going after how much we're making and it's about the amount, but I think ultimately it's actually about the purpose. With the idea being that the reason you would make a small amount is as a food flavoring, whereas if you're making a large amount, it's specifically to preserve things. And the reason that you can make it by putting oil in it first is their idea is that will prevent you from making pickles with it, because oil preserved pickles are not made with water. So you can't use it as brine for that. So I think the amount is actually just a cover for the underlying issue of purpose.
Yes. Or I would say not necessarily the purpose, but at least what the purpose looks like. You could make a lot of salt if you're having a Seder. You might have you might make a significant amount of salt water for the purpose of everybody having a little dish of salt water, which comes up in one of the Achronim. Not the Seder part, but what are the conditions under which you can do these sorts of things? But yes, I think that the primary concern is, right, are you going to, does it look like you could pickle with this thing? And just maybe to take that home, what's the deal with the 2 parts salt, 1 part water? Why would that be aser in any amount?
Because there's no use for it except to pickle. It's too salty to use otherwise.
Great. With that, let's turn to the Mishnah Berurah. It's on the source sheet, but you can also use your physical Mishnah Berurah if you have one. Your Zocha. Does someone want to read Tet? Jacob.
Hakivashim, Yarek Kovshin Oto Kedela Hit Kayem.
I think it's Kavushim. I don't think.
Hakivushim, Yarek Kovshin Oto Kedela Kayem. Shekivin Shinotin Me Malach Kedela Kayem. Dami Leiv Udaha Or. Samalach Mekaimo. So yeah, that's pretty much just what we had in the Torah. The Afal Gav de Kaimalan Ein Ibud Beochlin Midoraita Mikol Makom Midorabanan Mihu Asor. Kamosa Katva Post Game Biktav the Sefer Post Efet Shabbat Dafka Im Kavanatola Tate Latocha Kavushim Aval Im Ein Kavanatola the Heinish Dot Chalka Batocha Shilin Afilo Harbe Mutar. So even though we established that there's no ibud with food from Midoraita, according to the Rabbanan, there is an Isser, like Poskim write, and we write in book. It's written in the book Tosefet Shabbat. Specifically, the intention is to put the salt water into these vegetables to be pickled. But if his intention isn't for this, and his intention is to put it into food, even a lot of salt water is permitted. Of all, I'm not sure.
I actually was also not sure which sefer this was. Did anyone?
It's the Aliyah Rabbah.
No.
Rabba Oser.
Sorry, what did you say?
Aliyah Rabbah.
Elliot.
The Moshe Berurah quotes him a lot.
So that Rabba prohibits. V'chein ma'ashma b'me'irish kishav darak b'ma'at hetiru. Mipnei she'nikar she'en osa rak l'tzorach sha'a. Ma'aseh inkin b'harbe yisavru she'osa l'tzorach chol. Ayin shan.
Okay, so what's the Aliyah Rabbah's?
So he would prohibit making a lot of salt water, and we see more reasoning from the Meiri, because with a little bit, it's clearly recognizable. You're doing it for that moment. You're not doing it for a need on whole.
Great. Jacob or anyone else, how do these, first of all, just what are the, like, spell out the 2 positions here, and how do they relate to each other? Meaning, do they have the same concerns and just disagree about how to weigh them? Are these different concerns or are these related concerns?
I guess I'm not sure exactly what you're looking for, but I guess there's a concern of what one's intention is, like what they actually want to do with the salt water. And there's also the concern of what it's perceived as.
Great. Who would you say is subjective or first person? The question is subjective from the first person, and the question is versus the question is subjective from the I guess second or third person.
I mean, at least the majority of poskim and the Sefer Tosefet Shabbat are first person. The Aliyah Rabbah and the Meiri are, I guess, third person.
I think the majority of poskim are also third person. Tosefet Shabbos is the one who is the only one who I think who says you can make a lot of salt water.
Well, Moshe Katzva poskim v'katav v'sefer Tosefet Shabbat. Oh, I can see what you're saying.
I think Mihu Asur Moshe Katzva poskim.
Okay.
But I think it's the Tosefet Shabbos, I think, is the only one who says you can make a lot of salt water as long as you're not your personal intention. I think the other question is when the Tosefet Shabbos says it's a question of your kavanah, meaning is your kavanah to pickle or is your kavanah to put the large amount of salt water in food, in which case it's okay. Is that the same as when the Aliyah Rabbah says is your kavanah for Shabbos or your kavanah is for Chol? And they just happen to disagree about how to weigh those concerns. Or are they talking about slightly different variables?
I mean,
I don't want to put you on the spot, Jake. It could be you or anyone else also.
I'm not exactly sure about the Rabbah, but for the Meiri, the because of the word mipnei or the phrase mipnei nikar, it's kind of like how an action is perceived, and so it's a little bit different valence than the
way the Mishnah Berurah has it lined up, it makes it seem like there's another. Even if you were going to say he's sort of lining it up like this, the Sefer Shabbat was going to be more makil because you're not intending on doing pickling, which is well fine, but even in that case, it could look like hachana. So he said by adding the hachana worry, they sort of at least the way Mishnah Berurah plays it out, they're sort of overruling the idea that it could be okay if your intention isn't to pickle. They're just saying like there's another problem with making a large amount that you may not have thought of. Why are you making so much?
Great.
It looks
exactly.
like
Great. I don't think we need to read this other Mishnah Berurah for the sake of time, but we'll now move on. Let's read it.
Just out of curiosity, I before we move on, and I've been sort of I'm hesitant to ask because I've been upbraided about this before, but how much is a lot? Right? We don't actually, and once again, it's good that it's subjective, but how much is a lot? If I have a 70-person Seder, as someone mentioned earlier, you're running a big Seder, you're going to need a lot of salt water for that Seder. Do you just have to make it little by little by little, which is, absolutely one way you could do this. Do you have to have a jar of pickles in front of you to sort of measure it against or have some idea? Or is it simply, there's the level of subjectivity that we talk about. Is it just like, according to the Tosefet Shabbat, I can make an entire barrel of salt water as long as it's less than 2-to-1 ratio. If as long as my intent was to dip my bread in it or something. So what is, how much is too much? Is too much never enough? I don't know.
Anyone have an answer, either based on your intuition or based on a posik? Max?
I mean, it seems like the Magen Avraham thinks that me'at means that meal.
Great.
Let's say that the Tur doesn't actually say me'at. It says aval yachol la'asot mimenu me'at latet letoch hatavshil. So it's almost like you could define the me'at by the amount that you would need in a tavshil.
Great. Though there's one slight issue with that, which is if you look at the Mishnah Brura in Siman Yud Aleph, sorry, Seif Yud Aleph, Seif Katan Yud Aleph, where he says Hatavshil. Does everyone have the Mishnah Brura or pulled up online? Or do you want to read?
Sure. Hatavshil. O litbol bahen pito. V'chein mutar lishpoch al nitchei of v'dag tzalui. ובין אם הוא עושה לצורך סעודה זו או לצורך אחרת, אבל אסור לעשות לצורך חול. So I mean, he extends it to, I guess, if I'm understanding correctly, future Shabbat meals. So that wouldn't be more than, dare I say, 2 meals, perhaps 2 future meals. But that's, again, at least that gives you an idea of how much, because a giant barrel is probably too much even for 2 meals.
Great. Reb Joel.
Well, this is a debated issue, right? And again, and actually, I think the Mishnah Berurah cites it in the Shar Tzion, right? Right, it says Eliyahu Rabba b'shem harbe harishonim v'chatav shegam da'at Aran hu ken udelo k'Magen Avraham ayen sham. Right, and the Magen Avraham is the one who thinks that this really has to be for any kind of salt water you make has to be for this meal and can't be. And it's interesting because like we had the contrast that was given before between letzorach sha'ah and letzorach chol, but those aren't the only 2 options
Great.
that we're dealing with, right? It is a big question of can I make it, in the morning for Sudat Shlishit? And this is something we've seen as an idea throughout Hilchot Shabbat, especially Borer, but in other cases as well. Of, is it really just for that meal, or is it? Can you make it for the entirety of the day? I don't know.
Great. And in some ways, this again, not that this is like such important halacha l'masa, but when you're making enough salt water, that's more for than the purpose of this particular meal, but is for the purpose of this meal and the next meal. It is somewhere in between the logics of the Tosefet Shabbos and the Eliyah Rabbah, insofar as there's part of it that is a kavana that makes it okay. And there's also a question about a heker, right? Someone looking at me might say, why do you have so much salt water? That can't be just for this meal. But it's okay insofar as my kavana is to have it for next meal, so long as my kavana is not to have it for chol. But it is a sort of interesting boundary case that, again, I don't think, like, practically speaking, is so important, but just gets at the ways in which questions of like first person and third person considerations are like not totally clear.
I actually have a question for you about this a little bit based on Josie's question. I maybe for the group, maybe Rav Landis, right? I think there's lots of things in Hilchot Shabbat where we don't get a measure exactly, right? It's like how much it is. And there definitely is a move among certain poskim to say it's this much, right? Or this little bit. I don't know. Is that a good thing? Is that not a good thing? Is it one of those things where you kind of just know, and maybe that's the best way to leave it? This is maybe a bigger theory shot.
I understand, 3 generations, 4 generations ago, that they have cookbooks. Or they have also now cooking labs in which everything it has prepared, so where you have a feel. You have a feel for it. And therefore, I think that's a good way of doing it. You decide whether you're having a feel for 1 meal or having a feel for 2 meals. But 2 meals, Shabbos is the same, it's basically the same deal. They're not necessarily separated with that many hours, doesn't matter, it's the same thing. But I think, you like cooks have a feel, you should have a feel for this too. And I think that's the way one should pass it.
I think
without driving oneself out of your mind. out of your mind. You're not supposed to measure in Shabbos. So what are you going to do? You're going to start measuring what you can't do. How many aveiros you're going to do? It's like the guy who on Rosh Hashanah, the young rabbi, that means younger than me, was didn't have his automatic watch, so he used a stopwatch for the tekiah. So that I said, that's the aveira. I mean, that's the aveira. You're not supposed to use a stopwatch. All right. Anyway, I think it's the same thing. I think that's the way you have to be in Pesach. One knows. I remember going back to Josie's like and if you don't know, then somebody's going to yell at you anyway, so you'll know.
Off of Rabbandi's off what you said, I think it also, I mean, as with most of these things, like connects to questions of as one might say, rupture and reconstruction of these sort of like intuitive things, what's enough, what's too much, but both from a first person perspective and also from a third person perspective, that we may be in communities where like nobody exactly trusts anyone else to know exactly what the thing is that we're supposed to be doing. And the question of what counts as nikar also changes based on, can we trust our communities to trust us enough to assume that if something looks like slightly strange, that actually it's because we know the halacha and not because we don't know something. And how questions of like mimesis are not just about our individual practice, but also about what level of communal trust we have.
No, I'm so good. I'm glad you're taking it to that direction. Maybe it'll be Yashrut's contribution. We have one contribution, old style learning, another contribution, some form of accountability for ethics. Maybe the third one will be being normal human beings. Be normal about it. That's all. Salt water. How much salt water does it take? That's all.
Yeah, but how normal?
How normal?
How normal, like me. Normal, like me. And you know what? Like you too, because you spend enough time with me. You kind of just like get used to it. I'm serious about all that. And I'm going to look in my notebook to see how many times I told you that. But that's the point. I should look in my notebook to see how many times I told you. But get it through. But, in other words, it shouldn't lead to paralysis, as you just said, Aaron, or not cynicism, but kind of paranoia. All the words that start with a P, some sort of paranoia about us. Be fine. It's really fine. And then it will self-correct. After a time, it will self-correct. Now, I'm giving that example about cooking. I've never cooked anything in my life, but I'm a very good sous chef. So so that same thing here. I mean, I don't know, about this chef, but I think I'm a good soup posek. I mean, I think that works.
Did our blendeds. Well, on that note, maybe we'll forge ahead and we'll read Gimel in the Torah, and then the Beit Yosef, then the Drisha, and then we'll jump ahead to the Shulchan Aruch. We'll read Gimel through Hay with the Magen Avraham and the Taz. Everyone clear? Who hasn't read? Ruben, do you want to read Gimel?
Yes, happily. Okay, 1 second.
Oh, happily.
Juggling my many books, yeah. Okay. אסור למלוך חתיכות צנון 4 או 5 ביחד, אלא מטביל כל אחת ואחת במלח לבדה ואוכלה. אבל ביצים מותר למאכלן. Okay, so it's forbidden to salt pieces of radish 4 or 5 at once, but you can dip each one by itself in the salt and then eat it. But eggs, you can salt presumably a great many of them at once, or at least 4 or 5 at once. So you can do this with eggs, but not with radishes.
Great. Do you want to read the Beit Yosef?
Sure. Starting with
Asur limlach chatichot ston.
okay. Asur limlach chatichot tznon. Pashut sham b'gemara she'asur limloach tznon. Upiresh Rashi shalosh o arba chatichot yachad. Shehamelach me'avdan v'na'asin kashin v'havei tikun. Okay, so I'll pause for a second. So this is obvious from the Gemara that it's forbidden to salt radishes. Rashi explains specifically 3 or 4 pieces at once, because it seems like the salt is a tikkun. It makes it better. It improves the radish.
How does it improve it specifically?
It hardens it, which is okay. I guess that improves it. I don't know
Think
culinary
chips.
details I'm not aware of.
Chip like me.
Oh, maybe radish chips. But it hardens the radish and it improves it, and that's why it's forbidden. The Rambam katav b'perek kaf bet she'asur limloch tznon ukeyotze bo mipnei shenir'eh kovesh kvushin b'Shabbos. The kovesh asur mipnei shehu kemevashal. Okay, this is very significant, of course. So the Rambam writes that it's forbidden to salt your radishes and like foods, perhaps, or kitzebo, like foods, because it resembles pickling, and pickling on Shabbos is forbidden because it is considered mevashel. Mevashel, it's like mevashel.
Great. Okay, so we have our first machloket between Rashi and the Rambam. Anyone remember how the Shulchan Aruch is posek without checking?
The Rambam.
The Rambam. Okay, great. Let's anyone have any more to say on the difference between Rashi and the Rambam? Anyone have like a in what ways is this difference meaningful, both in terms of psak and also phenomenologically?
I think the idea of the pieces is interesting. It sort of connects now with what we were talking about, the amount of salt water, perhaps, because to make these actions like ibud, it sounds like there has to be a certain amount, and the amount makes it what you're doing into like a process, like tanning, like there's some kind of process involved. I mean, you could maybe apply that to the Rambam in terms of Mavashel also, I don't know, but it's maybe a little different, just that this amount of things that you're doing and that kind of processing, just to translate Hebrew more literally, is not allowed on Shabbat, but anything you're doing to eat semi-immediately again, which relates to the amount, is not processing. It's just preparing your bite, basically.
Great. And then I would just say in terms of psak, the difference is there are achronim who will derive both. I guess the Trimad edition does the Trimad edition count as a rishon? No. Sorry, I don't know why I asked that. There are achronim, there are achronim who will paskin this chumras and kulas based on Rashi. Sorry, it's been a long day. What?
Why is the Trimad edition rishon?
I am actually forgetting if he's a rishon or achron.
I think he's a rishon.
Yes. Great.
I don't understand why he wouldn't be a rishon. He's living during this. Rishon.
Okay.
1300s.
I think there's a few people who think that the tour is the end of the Rishonim, and in which case then you would, I guess, go that way. But if you think it's the Shulchan Aruch, then Shemat Hadeshen would be a Rishon. So.
Okay, I feel vindicated that he's an ambiguous case. Ruben.
I have a question about what we might call quick pickling, like if you wanted to on Shabbos just throw a bunch of cucumbers in some brine for like less than 30 minutes, just like to let the flavor seep in, and then would that be permitted potentially? It's if it's like for that meal and it's just going to be in the brine very briefly. Maybe there's like a Tosefet Shabbos, you're not doing it for like proper pickling, so it's okay. I don't know if there would be anyone who would permit that, but when I think of pickling, I guess it's like in the name, quick pickling, but maybe there could be an opinion that that's not really pickling because you're not preserving it and it's for that very meal and it's on that day. So I'm just wondering about that. Never done that on Shabbos, but done quick pickling very frequently.
Well, that's a great question that will take us to our favorite Aharon, sorry, our favorite Rishon, the Truma Hadeshin. So let's look at the Drisha. Asur limla chatichot snun arba or hey biachad. Jess, 200.
Sure. Sorry about that. أسئلة لما خد زمان أبا خمسة بياخد أهم مش كتاب بعض شو مقدشن بسيمان من هاي وشايل تباوت أنا خد زمان أخد لبدأ الخنيخان ياخد لبدأ كده لأخلان بجاد زو أخد بحقي نشمع لشم راشي لشم سيفة شوما شئيكا هكذا شنفو شتاين ושלושה ביחד, שם. הנה נראה לי לדעתק מלשון בעל תשומת דשן, זה דווקא לטבל אחד להניח לפניו שערי, אבל להניח לפניו על כלי אחד, שורה למנוף עליהן יחד, להבחן ולחזור למנוחן יחד, נראה לי זה אסור, וזהו גם כן עובדה לכל, גם לי מוכן כשאני כזה על גב זה, או מתחילים מחוזרים בגב. So the summary of that is, I think the one by one thing is really important to be actually one by one. If you're talking about like one jar at a time or something, that really is like a masachol position. And this comes from the Truma Hadeshin Rashi.
What's his kula? The Truma Hadeshin's kula? Jess or anyone?
Salt them one by one and line them up. And
Great.
sort of do a large amount, but just do the individual pieces.
Great. What's the hava mina there? Or what would be the other option? Halachically.
But
Or
you have to
stock-wise?
eat one at a time before
Okay.
you line them all up.
Great, exactly. So based on the Truma Hadeshin, or however makel the Truma Hadeshin is on this question, how would we answer Ruben's question?
Okay.
What did you say, Jess?
Well, no quick pickling if it involves a jar.
Right,
I
because
guess
this
you
is
can very quick pickle individual slices.
right, because this is right. Like this is already the concern is if you have 4 or 5 at a time and you're dipping them. So I think unless somebody is reading this differently, I'm not. I shouldn't be giving you psak, Ruben. In terms of the question, my understanding is that quick pickling would not be okay. But Reb Joel, maybe you know something.
I'm wondering if there's like we could define one thing as salting your food, which you could use salt water to do, versus fixing your food, to use Rashi's language, or to, change the nature of your food using salt, right? Those are two different things. One is to make it more flavorful, and the other is to actually change the food itself as its form, which is either in the Rashi or the Rambam, right? The Rambam sees it as a cooking, but cooking is a form of tikkun. So
right, and this would
And
definitely
generally we're very machmir on kavush. And we're worried about kavush, we're machmir on kavush. But again, the heter is that it's not when it's not kavush. then it's, which is only that taste, as was said, that's it. So, quick pickling is a problem. Slow seasoning may be okay, but it's still seasoning as opposed to kovish. What's the difference between kovish and that? Preservative, not preservative forever, but if what you're doing with a pickle or whatever, a cucumber, is going to make it last 3 days as opposed to, today with the taste, then that's the big difference between seasoning and kovish. But in general, anytime it comes up, everyone's, because we consider kovish as a form of, as I said before, bishul. You'll have them also more in your day.
I do wonder a little bit if like some of the difficulty of this for us is that I don't know in our world if we pickle so much to preserve anymore, we more pickle to give flavor because we have other ways of preserving. And so like we feel more distant from it in a way that I think, Ruben might pickle things, but I don't know about you guys, most of us.
No, but go back to what I said. I mean, does the kovish extend the life, is the
Exactly.
act
Yeah.
extend the life? And that it is, in other words. So, it's no, because your kovish, in order to give it a special, length of time, but it also gives it a special flavor. There's no doubt about it. Not the same
And
thing. Anyway, that's what I think.
and when we do Eurodea next year, I guess we'll all see again that there are different time lengths of usually to do to make something coverage, it takes a while, but there are certain cases under which it can happen very quickly.
I mean, that's it with salt, it changes the time by quite a bit.
That is the one.
So
Right. And so let's say that the also Ruben, to your question that leaving something in salt water for 30 minutes could be counted as like not just cooking, but like way past the limit of cooking. I think, yes. Okay, great. Let's move on to the Shulchan Aruch. So flip over or change your tab. Let's start with Gimel again, just so we can see exactly how he paskins, and then we'll go through Gimel through Hey, and then we'll circle back to the Magen Avraham and the Taz. So, Isaac, do you want to read?
Okay, we're on Vav.
Gimel.
Okay. וכתב הרב רבנו שמשון.
Sorry, Gimel in the Shulchan Aruch.
Oh, sorry, Gimel and Shulchan Aruch. Hang on. Okay. אסור למלוח חתיכות צנון, 4 או 5 ביחד, מפני שנראה כחובש כבושים, וככובש אסור מפני שהוא כמבושל, אבל מטבל כל אחת לבדה ואוכלה, אבל ביצים מותר למאכל. Okay, so basically, same deal. You can't salt a bunch of pieces of radish together because it looks as though you are pickling them, and pickling is usher because it is like cooking, but you can dip them one by one and eat them, but you can salt eggs.
Great. And just what's a review? Who does the Shulchan Aruch here paskin like?
That no.
The Rambam.
Rambam, exactly.
Yeah, I did say Rambam. Okay.
Yes, great. Okay, and Isaac, do you want to just continue with Dalet and Hey?
Yeah. יש מי שכתב שמותר לטבול כמה חתיכות צנון אחת.
Actually, sorry, Isaac, I'm gonna pause you. One thing I
Right.
forgot is just yeah, continue.
Okay. יש מי שכתב שמותר לטבול כמה חתיכות צנון אחת לבדה ולהניחם יחד לפניו כדי לאוכלם מיד זו אחר זו. So this is like we saw for the Trumat Teshin, that you can salt them one by one and put them on a plate, so just shove them all in your mouth.
Mhm.
And you don't have to salt them one, eat one, etc. Okay. אסור למלוח בשר מבושל או ביצה מבושלת להניחה. So it's forbidden to salt cooked meat or cooked eggs in order to like preserve them, keep them fresh. Something like that.
Yeah, to leave them lying around. It's not clear how long you're allowed to, what it means to leave them. We'll see that. Okay, great. I want to circle back now to the Taz. What did I say for the Taz? I actually want to do, I know we didn't prepare this, but I'd like to do the Taz Seif Katan Gimel. Kushin.
All right. Rashi lo natan ta'am ze, ela she'al yedei hamelach nitkashim v'hu tikun, v'ta'am ze hu mirambam, ונראה לי ללמוד מזה דין חדש דאסור לשפוך בשבת יין או שאר משכין לתוך כלי שיש בו חומץ, כדי שגם זה יהיה חומץ אחר כך. דזה הוא כחובש, כבושין, דהה מתכוון שאותו המעט ששופך שם יהיה נכבש v'yitchametz kenireli. Okay, so Rashi didn't give this reason about salting, but rather that the salting makes things hard, and that's a way of improving the flavor. And this reasoning that's given in the Shulchan Aruch is according to the Rambam's opinion. Okay, so it seems to me we should learn from this that there's a new law that it's forbidden to pour wine or another liquid on Shabbat into a vessel that already has vinegar in it, so that this should also turn into chametz, or sorry, chometz, which is vinegar. So I think the idea there is when you're making vinegar, the way you do it is you take like fruit juice or wine or whatever, and you add a bit of pre-existing vinegar. This is called the mother. Cue all the weird hippies coming out of the woods. And that helps create, like, turn it into vinegar more quickly, or like make it better vinegar. I'm not really sure which. So okay. Sorry, but this
is a good halacha in memory of Pope Francis turning wine to vinegar. It's a major.
I heard that it wasn't a good yontif for the pontiff.
Not good yontif for the pontiff. Very good. Okay, excuse me.
Sorry. So this is like pickling pickled stuff that because there's this intention that this little bit that you pour in will turn into something pickled and will like ferment. And this is my opinion. So I'm not actually entirely certain why this is exciting. This seems kind of obvious, like because it takes a while for something to turn into vinegar. And so you're effectively like making vinegar on Shabbos and setting it up to turn into vinegar over however many weeks. That would just seem to be aser regardless, because you're setting yourself up for something that you're going to use after Shabbos in and of I don't know, but maybe he's saying it's also asar because it's kovesh, which is kim vushal or kim vashal. Maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, I think so. It seems like a straightforward halacha, but just like a good thing to know. Let's just move on to the Magen Avraham in the Magen Avraham. Oh, we kind of looked already at the Magen Avraham on Sif Katan Daled. So let's look at the Taz on Sif Katan Daled and Hey. I know I only listed Hey, but it's just worth no, we'll just stick with Hey. Okay, Asur Limlach Basar. Max, you want to read?
Yes. Just lost my place. Okay. Near ed be'ilu ein hatam mishum dedome le'ibud, ki ein hamelach meshane es tiv'a shel elu, kmo shu meshane es atznon, v'shar devar shu charif omar. So meat is different than other things because the nature of the meat, or the I guess when you look at a piece of meat, it doesn't really change so much through the pickling process. At least definitely not like a radish or other things like that, onions. Aval be'elu eno ela litain ta'am bahem. Right? It just gives extra flavoring to the meat. Al kach or al korchech
Alkane.
alkain ein isur ela kisheminiach kisheminicha. Yes, right. So there's only an isur for leaving out the meat. Kach nereli l'das Rashi shezecharti b'samuch. Okay.
Okay, so how does that line up with dot Rashi?
It's because if you're worried about a tikkun, then I guess even if it doesn't or I guess by giving it flavor and then leaving it out, it seems like you're showing your intention that there's some sort of tikkun that happens with the food.
Or why would it be okay for Rashi to salt it as long as you're not leaving it? According to the
the tikkun isn't going to happen yet.
Great. Or there isn't a tikkun.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't work the same way for meat. Somehow for radishes, it's like changing the biology of it. In a way that I'm a little confused because it is a preservative for meat too, but not in the same immediate way. Joel.
It's cooked meat here though, right?
Right.
I think it's
Do you not salt cooked? This also is just my own ignorance about how to preserve meat in general. Do you not salt cooked meat to keep it?
Yes, you do.
Right?
Have you read the ingredients on
jerky?
Spam?
Yeah.
But it doesn't. I think in terms of right, it's not a tikkun in the same way. It's not actually right. We're not making like meat chip. I guess we could make jerky. But certainly if we're salting it right away in a way that's different from how it affects, at least according to Rashi's understanding, like the biology of the radish, or the chemistry of the radish, this doesn't happen with a piece of meat. We'll see how he thinks the some different reasoning would apply for the Rambam, but maybe we'll take a 5-minute break and we'll come back. And Nori, Lexi, and Jessica, I guess will join us in a moment. I realized I messed up slightly, which was we were supposed to look at the Beit Yosef before looking at the rest of the Taz. So I just want to turn us back to the Beit Yosef, where he says hey, which starts with Katuv b'shibboleh haleket. I did have that on the source sheet, but I apparently did not trust my own advice, and so I apologize for skipping that. Do folks have it? Josie, do you want to read?
Sure. Katuv b'shibboleh haleket, mutar limloch basar mevushal, o beitza mevushalet le'ochla le'altar. Aval limalcha ulahanicha asur. So just in short, the Shibboleh Leket writes that you can salt cooked meat or a cooked egg to eat immediately. But to salt it and then set it aside, you can't do that.
And this may be obvious, but this is where the Shulchan Aruch is getting the halacha from.
I think the authors of the Beit Yosef and the Shulchan Aruch knew each other, so that might
yeah, meaning that this is from the Shibboleh Leket is where he's getting it in the Shulchan Aruch.
V'chem matzate b'tshuvot hagaonim mishum melicha av melacha hi kititnan, and he quotes Shabbat 63 Aleph. Hatzad et tzvi v'chulei v'hamolcho ve'af al gav dehahi ena melichat basar v'af al gav dehahi ena melichat basar. So he's quoting this Gemara in Shabbat that talks about trapping and then salting the meat of the animal that you've trapped.
I think it's actually salting the skin of the animal. If you look at the bottom in the Hagahot v'Ha'arot, maybe just read that bet.
Kolomar elamelecha or the shach be'ibud. So here he's talking specifically about ibud, the tanning. Masha inkein basar delek isura kolkach. And this is from the Mordechai. V'avagav dehahi ena melicha basar. Dochi yachol lamar emlach lamar amelach chatichazo.
Emlach.
Emlach. I'm sorry. Emlach.
Or emlach.
Chatichazo ve'ochalna achshav ve'chozer ve'nimlach ve'eno chala. So the case we're setting up, it says you could say I'm going to salt this piece and I'm going to eat it right away, and then you don't actually get around to doing that. Ve'eno achlak uchudarav ada bar ava dima'aris. I'm sorry, dima'arim umalach grama. Af al pikain ein rotzeh le'asot kain b'mushal hu'il ve'ena basar nifsad b'lo melach ad kan lashono. So we're quoting this Gemara from Beitza that I'm sorry, we're starting with the Rav Ada Bar Ahava, that if you are sort of salting little by little here, and this is in Beitza, even so, if I don't want to do it, I'm sorry, if I want to do this with the cooked piece, and otherwise the meat would spoil without being salted. So I'm sort of trying to do this as a roundabout way of preserving my meat.
Great. So what, just Josie or anyone else, what are the main takeaways here? What's added? I guess in this case it's not added since we're going back to where the Shulchan Aruch got it from, but what is illuminated for us here? Reb Joel?
Well, I think just salting in general is something to avoid on Shabbos, right? Unless there's an immediate need for it.
Right. There's just the salting, even if you're not actually doing the Av Malacha, there's a gray zone that we want to be careful about. Any other main points people are seeing here? Reflex.
Well, it seems like, yeah, there's different kind of madrigot of like salting in its kind of initial form in the malachitic way, which is like the ibud, working the skins, etc. kind of format. And then you have salting as something that's considered basically a derivation where you're performing this like preservative function, right? So like salting, like doing pickling, etc., and things like that. And then you have salting things that are usually pickled or preserved, right? But that you're not actually trying to use it in that way. And there's still this concern, even though it's like several steps removed from the original, like most problematic element. And then you have also like salting of things for more immediate use of things that are not usually pickled, but there's still, again, like these different kind of gradients of like how connected to the ultimate concerns of like changing the essence of something or preserving it are we?
Great. And then apropos of what you said, just that how we're thinking about what those levels are changes depending on whether we think the primary concern is, as Rashi said, tikkun, or as the Rambam said, nireh kekovesh. So,
Aaron, are you planning to go on in the Beit Yosef for the next piece in the Shibboleth like it, or no?
I was not planning, but we could. I assigned it, so.
Yeah, just because he makes the distinction between, right, Yom Tov and Shabbat, where this harama might be permissible on Yom Tov when cooking is allowed, but on Shabbos, when you can't cook, then for sure you can't preserve. You can't be tricky about how you salt things.
Josie, do you want to continue then with the Beit Yosef?
Sure. וכתב עוד, בשר חי או דג חי, אסור למלכו בשבת כדי שלא יסריח. ובשבת לא שייך לאי אורמה כמו ביום טוב. So this is what Rev Joel just said. You can't, if you have a piece of raw meat or raw fish, you can't salt it on Shabbat because for the purpose of for the purpose of it not spoiling, because it's not really a Shabbat thing to do to act with this arama like you could on Yom Tov, because on Yom Tov you can cook. Dehalo nitan litzlot ulevashel b'Shabbat, because you can't cook. V'Rabbeinu Tam pasak basar chai ben tefel ben maliach mutar letatalo aval dag tafel asur letatalo umiliach mutar shahare neachal mechamat milcho k'mo basar maliach. So Rabbeinu Tam differs here, and I'm still trying to piece this together.
I'm not sure it's the difference. I think it's just another halacha.
So Rabbeinu Tam continues that with raw meat, whether it's been salted or not, you can move it. It's not moksa, but fish that's this raw fish, you can't move it unless it's been salted, because you can eat it just from the salting. Like salted meat.
Right, or unsalted. You can eat unsalted meat, I think is part of the idea, is that meat you can eat salted or unsalted, and fish you would, I guess he didn't know about sushi. Rev Joel, what were you gonna say?
No, I think he's saying, right, that salting fish is like cooking fish, is what he seems to be implying, like basar maliach. And
don't we have this case of fish that are like the teeny weeny fish that you cook by salting, or ceviche, for example, as opposed to sort of meat tartare.
Yeah, but it seems to be that unsalted fish to them is disgusting and not edible. Which,
Right. No sushi for them. So let's return now to the Taz. Maybe we'll just start at the beginning to so we have it in our minds. Max, do you want to take it again?
Yes. I left off at Avalo Rambam. Is that right?
Yeah, maybe just summarize what the beginning was.
So the first part is that there's no ibud concern with the meat because it doesn't change the nature of the food in the same way that it does for radishes and like vegetables. And so, according to Rashi, there's no tikkun that happens, and so there's no problem.
Mhm.
Okay.
Or it's only a problem if you leave it, in which case maybe
Right,
it's
sorry, right.
hachana.
If you leave it out and only after a certain, more time, it could become a tikkun problem. Okay. אבל הרמב"ם שתלוי במה שדרכו לכבוש, איני יודע למה יש איסור באלו שאין דרכו לכבוש. על כך, על כן. But the Rambam, who thinks that this is a pickling issue, I'm not sure this why there'd be an isur, because we don't salt cooked meat. We don't.
Mhm. I think al-kain is the beginning of the next phrase.
Yeah, that makes more sense. Okay, al-kain nireli. De mare de dinze los virale kirambam. Got it. That the mechaber,
Not the machaber. Whose halacha is this?
This was the Trumas Adeshan. Is that what we're
This
saying?
is the Shibboleh Haleket.
The Shivil like it.
Right. So the Shibboleh Haleket does not hold maybe like the Rambam. Why is that going to be a problem? Max or anyone else?
Right, because why would how would the Shulchan Aruch paskin both like the Rambam and not like the Rambam?
Good.
Right, kasha al Shulchan Aruch she'etik Rambam ve'oser bezeh. Right. V'kasav Beis Yosef b'shem Shibboleh Haleket. Hatam de malicha av malachahu b'mishnah gabi tzvi v'afal gav dehahi eina malicha basar. Right, that's what we saw a minute ago. V'od sheyuchal lomar emlach chasicha v'ochlena v'achar kach nimlach v'chulei. Right, we saw that as well. Filhachi ein lasos kin bimvushal ho'il ve'ein habasar nifsad below melach. Right. Even so, this still doesn't happen with meat because even if it's unsalted, that's not going to necessarily affect the quality of the meat. No?
No, I think this also. I just want to maybe Aaron. I think he's saying, Sheila, don't do this with like you can be if you really need to preserve something for later on, Yom Tov or whatever. You can like do harama by saying I'm salting this to eat and then not eat it. But for things you don't need to salt to preserve, don't do this.
Right.
Bad.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Got
But
it.
he's going to zoom out now for.
Okay.
Now he's going to offer his resolution of how the Shulchan Aruch seems to be holding like the Rambam and not like the Rambam.
Also not. Okay. Mashma lefi hamaskana shelo de'in isor baror bezeh afil midivrehem ela mitzad she'in tzarich lezeh ve'lama yatriach atzmo b'chinam b'Shabbos. Right, so the actual problem is that it's just like too much of a tircha.
Yeah, or it seems like there's not really a problem. It's just it's here.
Right, or like maybe uvda dechol or something. Right.
Not even uvda dechol necessary. It's like
Right.
he's
Okay.
himself trying to figure out like it must be that you're doing some marginally more stressful or
Hotchkiss.
cumbersome thing, but again, like marginally.
Yeah. Dehalo yuchal limlach b'suda acheres sheyochal bo b'yom.
If you're gonna leave it, you might as well just salt it at the next meal.
Right. And not yeah. V'chein kasav Beis Yosef b'shem Tshuvas HaRashba, Tshuvasim Samech Hey, dekol davar shedarko la'asos dakdak b'shas bishulo, uminicho la'achar sha'a asur. So this position of the Rashba that anything that's going to be finely chopped, you for that you also can't leave that over. It needs to be done samuch l'suda. V'hachanami kan Hachinami kan,
yeah.
Okay, yeah. V'melicha l'deazos nimsa lefizeh she'im yesh eshet tzad shetov lo she'imlach achshav mima she'imlach achar kach kagon shehu achshav k'tzas cham v'yikabel tfei hamelach in isur b'davar kach nireh lenistayati. Right. So, but if it happens to be the case that there's some benefit to doing it now, like something to do with the weather, then there's no Isser.
I think not the weather. I think just the food is hot.
Okay. That's freshly out of the oven or something. Okay. I wasn't sure if it was yeah. Okay. That makes more sense.
Right, it's hotter and it will like absorb the salt better. Okay. What if we had to zoom out here, just what are the broader or deeper concerns raised by these fairly minute questions? Any new concerns that beyond the ones we talked about already? Anyone find the Taz's reasoning interesting, compelling, curious?
Just this idea of like doing many steps for meal prep, the potential problem of like the kinds of things you would do to prepare in advance that's related to mavasha, like pre-cooking, sort of like sous chef things. There's like a bunch of work that has to be done. That could be a problem if it's a lot of tircha at least, and not like it's not something you're doing right before sitting down to eat. It's sort of like the process of cooking.
I mean, there are plenty of times where like I'm like getting the food ready, especially if like I'm eating alone or like with a small group, and like it's kind of I might like get the food ready for lunch and like get some of it ready that I know I'm also going to need it for dinner. In certain ways, it might be okay, and in certain ways here that could be problematic. Insofar as I think what the Taz is pointing out, that at each moment of Shabbos should be lived for not to at the risk of Rav Landis, please forgive me. I wouldn't want to sound neo-Hasidic in any way, but there is like an emphasis on being in the moment of Shabbos, not just looking ahead to Chol, but looking ahead to any later moment of Shabbos. Even if you're making it easier for yourself later in Shabbos, and you might say, there's a Hava Amina of, oh, I'm getting extra rest for Shalshidus because I've already salted the meat and now I don't have to do it. I did it earlier in the day. That is somehow detracting from your experience of earlier in the day on Shabbos.
Right. / also just that there is something less Shabbos-tic about the experience of like preparation in advance, even if it is again not for Chol. That like the idea of like, oh, I'm doing something like Farach Suda isn't really like, oh, I'm doing my work to prepare and to set things up for myself in the future. It is genuinely like I'm about to eat. And that like anything that is preparatory, yeah, is like definitionally, even if it's not fully pulling you out of Shabbos, it is pulling you out of the sort of Shabbos mode of being.
Right, we could say that preparation is an uvda dechol, not because you're preparing for chol, but in and of itself, it's an uvda dechol.
So you've moved the notion of hachana, which the hachana may Shabbos l'chol, to hachana itself. Is that what you're doing? The hachana itself is has it's not the same thing as hachana. Hachana itself. That's what you're saying, right? Hachana itself is problematic. Is that what I'm hearing?
That seems to I didn't say that. That seems to be what the Taz says.
But not always.
Not always.
Only in specific cases where there's maybe a big tircha. Also, it's salting that in general looks and feels like something that could be very problematic if it were like actually for preserving or right. So you're kind of, there's a lot of other reasons that are making that hachana feel a lot less Shabbosdik, I guess.
Well, for the Taz in this particular logic train of his, he makes it clear he doesn't think there's any other problem. That even the concerns around salting are not really such, at this level of concern, not really a concern anymore. And that it, Rav Joel.
Yeah, I think there's got to be like a sniff of malacha to it, though, right? We've seen this with borer, right? You can't do borer, for bayom for later, and it has to be like miyad. We've seen now this Rashba reference, which I think we'll see later in the Siman, right? About chopping things up very finely, things that would be normally cooked. Also, so like you can't do tochen, some sort of something that looks like tochen if it is not for immediate use. And here again, you also can't maybe salt things because there's also a hint of malacha to salting, as he's put it at this point, right? Because there is a malacha of salting, just not for food. And so anything that has a hint of malacha, you can't do it as a prep process for Shabbos. You can only do it for immediate use.
Nonetheless, is this a chiddush that we're considering hachana in and of itself a problem?
I do think that Taz is a little more radical, Rav Joel, than what you're saying, just insofar when he says mashma lefi hamiskana shelo de'ein isur barur baza afilu midivrehem, that he could have said there's a tircha and there is a hint of malacha, but he seems to be very clear that like there isn't, or he thinks the Beit Yosef is really struggling to find any sort of hint of malacha here, and that it's actually beyond the specificity of a malacha and more about you're doing something right now that you don't need to do. I guess granted that, yeah, in other cases you're going to have to do, that's going to involve some sort of action, which could always be traced to a malacha, but it seems to not be, because the problem with it doesn't seem to be that it's traceable to malacha, but that
The only way, sorry.
That's it.
The only way I can reconcile it is that the guardrail and how far can you go in preparation of food on Shabbos is part of achila. It's just part of the achila. You're preparing it, you're salting, you're doing whatever it is at that moment. It's just how people eat. And then to say we're going to wait until Friday night to Shalosh Shudas, etc., the guardrail has been down. But I'm still having trouble with it, making hachana itself a problem.
Joseph?
I'm done.
Oh, Josie, you unmuted. Were you going to say something?
Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, I could say something, but it just
You're
seems
very
like now
welcome to.
It just seems now he's introducing an idea of it's not Shabbosdik. I can't actually, the Taz is saying that he cannot articulate a firm reason why you can't do it, only that there are a number of things around it and it all looks like something that you can't do without. It's like couldn't you do without it for 8 hours, 12 hours, 16 hours? But there doesn't seem to be a clearly articulatable reason saying this is forbidden because X.
Yeah. I think that's right. Any other last thoughts on this?
I think you can't disconnect it from the fact that if I were to leave it longer than for the next meal, it would be a normal case of preserving. So I hear what you're saying, that it's not clear to what extent he's saying all those factors don't really apply, but there certainly are a lot of, the sheer amount of it, like maybe it's not total tircha, but there's just a lot more meat than you would normally be doing for achila. So I still think those are the reasons why ultimately we're looking at hachana in this way. But it's not a normal case of hachana. I don't think he's, hachana for Shabbat.
Great. I mean, the only reason I would push back on that and what Rav Joel said is when he says there isn't any clear reason. Like, he has every option to give the Beit Yosef an out and say maybe it's because, like, if you leave it for this meal, you'll accidentally leave it for whole. Maybe it's because it's like related to Malicha. But the fact that he doesn't give the Beit Yosef any other out makes it seem, now I'm attached. I think I'm attached to the idea that this is a more dramatic statement. But you're totally right that it could be just like, when he says there isn't a reason, he means like, obviously there's like plenty of reasons going around. There's not like a special reason, but it's Shabbos and like you're leaving things around and salting things. It's hard to know. I didn't see anything like so deep on it in the Mishpat Zahav. But if anyone sees anyone writing about the Taz, let me know. Maybe with that, we'll jump ahead to so little time. We'll jump ahead to Vav. Ruben, do you want to read? I don't actually remember who's read how many times, but
I'd be happy to. Do you want me to read in the Torah?
We're just gonna go in the Shulchan Aruch.
Okay. Okay, Vav. אין למלוח ביחד הרבה פולים ועדשים שנתבשלו בקליפתן. So you can't salt at once together. You can't salt lots of beans and lentils together that had been cooked in their outer shells, or I'll just say outer shells.
Great. And do you want to read the Taz?
Yes. Okay. Harbe polin, lots of beans. Mashma afilu le'ochlam le'altar. V'nir'eh li dehem domin letznon, ki hamelach merakech hakushi sheyesh bahem mitzad klipatan v'domeh le'ibud. Okay, so he says that we can infer from this that even if you were to eat them immediately, this is still forbidden. And it seems to me that it resembles the case of the radishes, in which case the salt softens them. Softens the hard external parts of them, and it resembles ibud. It's like tanning a hide.
Great. What is a Svaradic problem with his explanation here? At least why is it surprising to hear the Taz after what we just went through, to hear the Taz say this?
Rashi and not Rambam.
Great. Yes, the Mishpat Zahav does go through this a little bit. I don't think that's how we'll spend our time in this moment, but just I think, and again, that like both, I think it points to the Machaber's reasoning is a little unclear, how he's going back and forth between these two, but also just that like these categories of, is it tikkun or is it domela ibud, or is it I guess tikkun being domela ibud, or is it nireka kovesh, that they're not like totally distinct, that there's an overlap, and it is like sort of like a feeling, does it feel like there's something wrong? And it seems to go back and forth relying on both tamim. Which would be fine if the Mechaber said you should be, choshesh for both tamim. It's just the fact that he doesn't that leads us to this problem. Let's move to let's go to Zion. We have time to do the tour. Let's do Zion in the Shulchan Aruch.
Did you want me to keep? Oh, sorry.
No. Thank you for your service. Ori.
Back in the office. Zayin. Mutar laduch pilpilin. Afilu harbe yachad. V'hu sheiducham dekata shel sakin ubekara. So is it crush peppers?
Yes.
You can crush peppers, even a lot of them together, as long as you're doing it with the side of the knife and with a bowl, as opposed to, I guess, a press or some kind of machine.
We'll leave that open as to what the
alternative
is. Does anyone? I don't know if anyone remembers how to hear it. Kata, I thought was the back of the knife. Is it? Yeah.
With the handle.
Yeah. Okay, great. Let's look at Magen Avraham. Which should I assign? I think I assigned 9. I assigned 9. That's possible. I meant to assign 10. I think I meant to assign 9. Okay. Ori, do you want to continue the Magen Avraham?
Magen Avraham.
Or actually, just maybe before what is notable about how we're allowed to crush the peppers?
You asked how many shinuim do you need?
Great. How many shinui? Is this 1 shinui or 2 shinuim? And do we need both?
What's the second shinui?
What is the second shinui? Anyone know?
You mean the handle of the knife as opposed to the knife?
Chad plus handle.
What was the first thing you said, like?
The chad, doing it like rather than in like large amount.
This you can do in a large amount.
Kiara.
Right. It has to do with the bowl. So let's read the Magen Avraham Sif Katan Tet.
Perush o bekara sheiducham b'shulei kara. He's explaining it as, or you could do it with a bowl. That you crush them with the edges of the bowl, or the plate. Dahavi shinui gamur. That would be a total shinui. Chayin nirali perush Rambam. The im lo ba'inan trei shinuim kashe. Dahabigmara lo iskir ela chad shinui. Dahainu b'sakin. V'chainu v'tosefta. Ayin Beit Yosef b'Shem Ha'agur. So he says, it seems to me from the Rambam, if you didn't need 2 shinuim, that would be.
If sorry, I think it's de'im lo deba.
De'im lo.
If you, if not, such that you did need 2 shinuim.
That would be a problem from the Gemara, because the Gemara only seems to mention 1 shinui, which is the knife. Also in the Tosefta. But how do you see that as 2 shinuim? I'm missing something.
1 shinui is with the knife, and 1 shinui is on the side, doing it on the side of the bowl.
Saying I do both.
The Magen Avraham is saying you only need to do one.
I mean, isn't the bowl, the shinui is that it's that as opposed to the meducha?
Great, exactly. And so for the Magen Avraham, there's an or here because the Gemara only mentions one shinui. And if there were two shinuim that were required, then there would be a kasha on the Gemara.
But first of all, what I'm missing is the simple reading of reading it as and. You're saying there's some kind of double shinui of doing it with the knife and the bowl.
Right, that's when the Magen Avraham says pirush o bekara.
I read it shot out obikara. I'm trying to figure out how to read it as ve.
Oh, the pshat of the Shulchan Aruch is ve.
Yeah. But you're saying I did half the job of crushing with the knife and finished it off with the bowl?
No.
One into the other.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I was missing. I was just sort of missing the like physical picture. I see.
I feel like that is often the problem for these things where we have like such different realia.
Right. Well, is it a little like a mortar and pestle in that regard? Like you use two instruments in order to crush something.
Exactly.
Okay. But then to look at it as, you would be talking about just using the bowl instead of the knife to crush it up.
Right, meaning you could use a bowl and the top of the knife, or you could use the bottom of the knife, but do it in a machteshet. I think according to Magen Avraham.
Using so you're reading it as the sharp part of the knife on the edges of the bowl.
You can do the sharp part of the knife in the bowl, or you can do the handle of the knife in a machteshet, I think.
Yeah, I think what he's talking about with the kara, he's talking about sheyiducham b'shulei kara, is that you actually just like take a bowl on top of the pilpulim and you.
That's what I pictured.
Yeah, same.
Interesting.
Just the bowl. That's what he means by like you only need one tool. You could use a knife. You could use a bowl. I don't know. Okay. Should I finish off the reading?
The rest is not so important.
Can I ask you a question?
Mhm.
Are these just looking at the rest of them again, Abraham? Are these dry spices? Like, are the peppers dry or are they still fresh? Because then again, Abraham says this applies for all spices, which I usually think of as being dry.
I'm not sure. Anyone know?
I'm pretty sure dry.
Okay.
Just based
That
off
would be
of the
my
way they
guess
often
as
talk
well.
about the crushing and the functionality of it. Like I think part of why it's different also that like a pepper that's like a not yet dried pepper is like more comparable to also a lot of other forms of food than to like a fully concentrated spice in the way that like peppercorns are.
Oh, I was thinking about like a full pepper.
Like a dried chili or something?
Like a dried chili versus like a fresh serrano.
Yeah, my impression from their names, I think it's more like peppercorns.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is also my.
That was my question. Is if we're talking about crushing peppercorns like in a pepper grinder type of thing versus by your knife handle or just taking a bowl, overturning it and smushing them down like that.
Yeah, because if they're not dry, then they would be kind of like any other
vegetable.
I don't think you'd have to have special. I don't really know the process of drying peppers, so I shouldn't speak confidently about it. But let's
we
look.
don't have. I think the assumption is it's dry. I don't think we have a. Even though there could be something that's spicy, we talk about spices, they're dry.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's jump to the Mishnah Berurah, who I think understands Bishulei Kli as I was understanding it. Oh no, sorry, as Rav Joel was understanding is what I meant to say. But so Mishnah Berurah, Sif Katan 25. And Jess, do you mind reading?
Yes, would you mind telling me when
Sif Katan Kafeh
of the
of the Mishnah Berurah.
okay, you should maybe go somewhere else and take him. So then I can find it again and come back to
Anyone have it pulled up or available in front of them? Reb Joel, go for it.
All right. Uvikara. Pirush. אבל לא ידוך בקטה של סכינה במכתשת. So he says, but the explanation, you cannot crush with the back of the knife in the thing that you normally grind things in. I don't know, is that the mortar or the pestle? I never know which is which, whatever it is.
I think the pestle is this part. And
Is
the
the
mortar.
okay? Is the yeah okay? This is a way to show how uninformed I am. Even though you have already made shinoi, right, by doing it with the back of the knife, because you're doing it in the mortar. I assume this is a mortar, but it looks like the work of you're doing it on a Wednesday. Vehuadin dedach bekata al gabe shulchan. It's the same rule if you crush it with the back and you just do it straight on the table, back of the knife straight on the table, or you use the bottom of a vessel onto the table, because then you have two distinctions, two changes you made. But with the, I don't know what kind of tool buchna is, but it's something that you use for crushing things. So maybe that is the pestle. I don't know. Maybe someone else knows the right term.
Something for crushing olives, I saw.
Oh, great. So then even if you do it on the shulchan, you don't do it on the machteshet, or you do it straight into the plate, that's still a problematic. So he's understanding it really in the way that the Taz doesn't want you to understand it, which is that you need two shinuyim, which is as an and statement. Should I keep going to the mold?
No, you don't have to read the next piece. I don't think we're going to cover that. Anyone have an explanation for why we would need two shinuyim?
the only thing I was wondering, and this was not backed up by anything, was is it one to get something from Doraita to Durabanan and one to get something from Durabanan to Ruta? That's not very. That doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it could be. I don't personally have any idea.
One shinui could be for the halach itself, so to speak. And the second shinui could be for like a marasign. I mean, in other words, that you have two shinui.
That sounds like a good explanation to the Ravlandis. Okay, with our remaining time, let's just do Seif Chet. Jess, do you want to take this one? In the Shulchan Aruch?
Sure. אין קטציין מלאך במדף של עץ, אבל מרסק הוא ביד של חכים ובעץ הפרות ואינו חושש. So you can't crush salt with a wooden pestle, but you can crush it with the handle of the knife or with a wooden pot ladle, and there's no concern about that. And then the Rama says, ודווקא מלאך הגס, אבל מלאך שהיה דק מתחילה ונתבשל ונעשה קציצין, מותר לחתוך בתכין כמו שהחלק אחד. So the Rama says this stringency only applies to big salt. If it was fine to start with and then it got cooked and it sort of started to clump together, then it's fine to cut it with a knife, like a bread knife.
Great. So we'll just look at some tiny Mishnah Berurahs. I'm going to put them in the chat. They're also in the source sheet. Jess, do you want to continue?
So, ביד, אבל הפדחת וחותמת סכינה אסור, So you can use a knife handle that you want to just sort of chop finely with the blade of the knife. shel סכין, יוסף בקערה או שולחן, אבל לא במחשב. אין נראה לי
I think ukanal. I think
Ukanal.
ukaniskarleo.
Okay. Okay, lovely. So you can crush it on a plate or on top of the table, but not with a mortar and pestle. I didn't quite hear what you said the second name was.
Oh, kaniskarleo, like as above.
Oh, Keniskarel.
Right.
As we talked about before, we were talking about.
Right. What is the
Last
Mishnah? Just for just before we jump on to Lamed, for Jess or anyone else, what is the thing the Mishnah Brura is now trying to square in Kafchet?
All the different ways we've said that you can or can't chop things like pepper and salt and try and make them consistent.
Right. What's the contradiction he seems to, or potential contradiction between what he said, or what the Shulchan Aruch says in Zion and what the Shulchan Aruch says in Chet, according to the Mishnah Brura? Jess or anyone? How many Shinuim are in Chet? One. What does the Mishnah Brura do in Kafchet?
Adds one.
Right, he adds another Shinui, I think.
Aaron, I have a question, and maybe this comes to why maybe the Shulchan Aruch doesn't feel you need this. Maybe someone says this right? There's no tochen in things that are not gidu like karka, right? Is salt gidu like karka?
Well, that's a debate, but
Right.
there's a machloket as to whether it applies to things that aren't gizli karka or not.
Yeah, but the Shulchan Aruch clearly paskins that way in text.
So there's
right?
somebody who brings up that contradiction, I think.
Is there? Okay.
The Mishnah Brura addresses another question, but yeah, that's a good question. I can't remember if the Mishnah Brura also talks about that, and let's see if I didn't put in. No. Jess, do you want to continue with Lamed? Oh, it's sorry, it is the Magen Avraham who I think we it's on Tet, that's why, later in the source sheet. Maybe we'll just skip the end of the Mishnah Brura and jump ahead to Tet and the Magen Avraham then, or Tet and Yud. Isaac, do you want to read Tet in the Shulchan Aruch? Isaac, you're muted.
Sorry. מותר לחתוך בשר מבושל או צלי דק בסכין. So it's permissible to chop up cooked or boiled meat, roasted meat very thin with a knife. אבל אסור לחתוך תחתך בשר חי לפני העופות, דהואיל ואינן יכולים לאוכלו בלא חיתוך, כמסוי לאוכל.
I think כמשווה.
כמשווה לאוכל. Okay. So, but it's forbidden to chop up raw meat. I actually didn't get to Tet. We've now have like birds.
Yeah, I think you can't chop meat for bird feeding purposes. It's not so important for. I think this is really not halacha l'maaseh probably for most
birds?
of us, but
yes. Do you have falcons? Okay, whatever. I don't.
But the reason is important. So why can't we do this, even though chopping meat is fine?
Because we're turning it into food. Like
Exactly.
It wasn't previously food. I guess these birds. I'm sorry. This just feels like I have a lot of questions about falconry now.
Right,
Okay.
the birds can't eat it without it being
Yes,
chopped
but if
up.
they're
So
birds of prey, then why can't they? Never mind. Okay.
But
Um,
chickens, I mean, if you raise chickens in your yard, right? You can feed them meat. They have
That's
no
true.
problem cannibalizing.
That's true. The chickens will eat anything.
My
Um,
my partner's parrot will eat pretty much any meat you throw at her. So
Yeah. No, and
it's-
chickens will eat their own eggs. A chicken will literally eat anything, just like a pig. Okay.
Okay. So now we'll just read the first sentence apropos of Rav Joel's question of the Magen Avraham Sif Katan Yud.
דהרי התוספות והראש כתבו דאין תחינה באוכלין, ואף שקצת סביר לדגש תחינה, כמה שכתוב סעיף י"ב, דווקא בגידולי קרקע, אבל בשר דאין גידולו מן haaretz lo shayech bo techina. Okay, so the Tosafot and the Rosh wrote that there's no issue with grinding when it comes to food. And like a little bit of their reasoning is that
I think not a little bit of their reasoning. I think some do hold that there is tchina b'ochel.
Okay, so some consider that there is tehina in it, as we'll see in Seif Yod Beit. It is specifically in things that grow from the ground, but meat that does not grow from the ground, tehina doesn't apply to it.
Great. That's it. They don't actually address Rav Joel's question of what about salt. But there, at least the idea seems to be there's an tchina achar tchina. But okay, with our last 30 seconds, I'll just say looking forward to learning from Jacob next week. And as I said at the beginning, I think what's interesting about all of these, or about the Siman in general, is the way in which, again, it has to do with like the marginalia of food, the places where like you're making, or back to what the Taz says, right? These are like tiny efforts we would be making one way or another, whether they're for this meal or for another meal, or we're somewhere in the back of our minds as we're doing this for whole purposes. But that these are all like at the margins and edges of the meals. But since the meals are the Ikar of Shabbos, these are also like important boundary questions about what does it really mean to keep Shabbos, and the question is like determined at here at the boundary. So wonderful learning with you all, and I won't see you next week, but I'll see some of you next week in Rav Joel's class on Thursday.
Oh.
Yasher koach, thank you.
Bye,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you.
Gayach.
Right, thank you.